One of these cars has defined the term sports sedan for decades. However, resting upon those laurels leaves room for newcomers to come in and take the crown. And the newcomer is someone that you would have never expected. This is the Genesis G70 versus the BMW M340. Now for the sake of this video, we have to define what it means to be a sports luxury sedan. You need a peppy and strong engine, you need a snappy and smooth transmission, and you need a chassis and suspension setup that gives you the confidence of Lewis Hamilton. Or at least that's what the old formula was.
Now you need an abundance of technology, elegant cabin design, an isolated, quiet, and luxurious interior, the most conditioned cowhides, and a whole slew of driver assist systems. Yeah, driver assist technology on your sports sedan, as if you don't buy it to drive it. Well, let's start with the boring stuff, and I promise I won't take up too much time with this. BMW has always done a fantastic job of taking stark performance and injecting a shocking level of luxury and refinement. In most recent times, BMW has been something of the technology king, with things like their 3D augmented reality parking assist, their reverse breadcrumbs, and so much more tech that's just stuffed to the gills in this thing. As far as design, my chief complaint about the BMW these days is that every single interior on their models looks exactly the same. That's not to say that it's bad. It's still made of high quality materials and it feels really sturdy. It's just kind of boring. The design isn't very interesting or creative, but BMW sports sedans have always been about subtlety, so maybe that's what they're going for. One thing I do like is the leather in the seats. With the exception of Lexus and maybe Mercedes, these are some of the nicest feeling leathers on an interior of a car that I've been in recently.
Now let's get into the dressed up Hyundai and see how luxe it feels compared to one of Europe's best.
The first thing that strikes me upon climbing into the interior of the G70 is the really well designed dash layout, with the exception of the screen. I don't love the way that's tacked on. There are some things that are kind of cheap looking on this G70, like the cup holders, but there's an overwhelming amount of upscale materials, so you can kind of forgive it a little bit. Plus the climate control knobs remind me of an Audi R8 the way that they hang down a little bit, and that's really cool. Now remember how I said I like the leather on the BMW? Well, I really like the leather on the G70. Rear seat room is non-existent, but the quilting and the stitching and the leather on the seats and the doors and everywhere, it's so soft, it's supple, it's top 5. And ultimately, the technology and amenities on the G70 are on par, if not a little bit better than the BMW. The BMW doesn't offer cooled seats, and the G70 does, which are quickly becoming some of my favorite things in cars today. Now, ultimately on the inside, what it comes down to is, do you want a cheaper but more exciting interior, or a more refined but kind of boring cabin?
And now the part that you're all here for.
Alright, so just like the interior, we're going to start with the reigning champ. And as soon as you put your right foot into it, you understand why it is the reigning champ. The engine and transmission work so well together. BMW tunes their ZF 8 speeds so well to wrangle all of that horsepower and torque. All of that 382 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque, it just puts it down to all 4 wheels so easy, and it gets you so much power coming out of the turns. It's effortless, and it's just buttery smooth. Now, speaking of buttery smooth, obviously this is the M340, so it gets a bunch of tweaks from BMW's M division. Most notably is the limited slip differential, the LSD in the back. It manages the flow of torque to the rear axle so well. I always have plenty of power, and I always have plenty of grip. Put some power in through this corner, and it's no problem. No problem. Now, speaking of corners, let's go ahead and throw it in here. We're going to talk about steering, because BMW's been taking a lot of crap for their steering for the last few years. And yeah, there's not a whole lot of feedback, but it's an electronic steering rack. I mean, there's not a whole lot of feedback in really anything these days. The problem is that the steering was so good in previous BMWs that they set the bar too high. So now, with the electronic, it's lost a little bit of feeling, but it's still extremely precise. The on-center feel is fantastic. There's no play or slop in the center, and it's just completely responsive. The car points exactly where I want it to. You manage the angle with the throttle. It works really well. Now, the thing about this M340 is that it's basically idiot-proof. This thing inspires so much confidence in you as a driver that you really can't screw it up. dynamically it just handles like butter. I mean, it's so controlled, it's so tied down, but it allows for that little extracurriculars, that little bit of slip in that rear diff, that you can get the back end loose a little bit and have some fun. Now, one of the best things about this M340 is the exhaust note. And with these sports sedans specifically, they're so close that it comes down to something like the Sport exhaust to make it kind of stand out. And in Sport Plus, the crackles and pops and just the low raspiness, this is one of the best sounding straight sixes that you can get. This is the best sounding six, one of the best sounding sixes that you can get today. So the question that we need to be asking ourselves is not necessarily, is this a fast car, but is this a fun car? Is this a good sports sedan? And I think the answer is absolutely yes. You know, it still feels a little bit weighty in the corners. There's definitely no mistaking that this is a heavier car, but the engine and gearbox work so well together that I'm never hurting for power. It's so peppy that it makes the car feel a little bit lighter and a little bit smaller. And that raspiness and that exhaust note just add a whole little cherry on top to make it feel really good.
So it seems the M340 has ticked all the luxury sports car boxes. It's got luxury, it's got amenities, it's got comfort, it has a strong engine, it has a tight suspension, and it drives fantastic. So let's jump into the G and see how it keeps up.
All right, we're behind the wheel of the Genesis G70. Now the Genesis G70 is brand new. Basically, it's been in existence for 1, maybe 2 years. And they know what they're doing over there. The G70 has already won Motor Trend's Car of the Year for 2019, and it's not like they just give those awards away. You need to know what you're doing. I drive a lot of cars, and there's a reason that I picked this car to take on the Benchmark 3 Series for sports sedan. Under the hood of the G70, we have the range-topping 3.3-liter twin-turbocharged 6-cylinder, but it's arranged in a V formation rather than a straight 6 like the BMW's is. This power plant is good for 365 horsepower and 376 pound-feet of torque, so it's down a little bit in terms of horsepower, but the torque is a bit higher. Now this power goes through the same 8 gears that a BMW does, but it's not a ZF-tuned transmission. This is a Hyundai Genesis derived transmission, and you can kind of tell a little bit. The transmission is good, it's quick, and it's intelligent, but you can tell it's still a little hesitant. It's not quite sure what gear you need to be in all the time. When it does get it right though, it really pulls. Jeez, that turbo comes in and it's just loads and loads of thrust in the bottom of your back. This thing is quick, it's darty, and it's agile, and that's the reason that I like it so much. Now when I talk about the transmission being a little bit laggier, it is, but it's still putting all that power to all 4 wheels like the BMW. 0 to 60, this G70 gets there in 4.5 seconds, which is a whole 3/10 slower than the BMW that gets there in 4.2. Now the G70 is not the quicker car, but where it makes up for it is in the bends. The chassis and suspension on this thing are incredibly taut, it's very rigid, it's a very disciplined feel behind the wheel. And that's the reason that I think it feels more like a sports sedan should. It feels lighter, it feels more playful, and it feels like you can drive this thing a little bit harder than you can in the M. And it has no problem maintaining grip in corners. Now, much like the BMW, the steering is really precise, it's direct in here, there's no real slop in here. In sport mode, obviously the steering hefts up a bit and there's a good weight to it. There's still not a lot of feedback, but that's just with the times. What I don't like about the steering is the actual steering wheel itself. Getting in from the BMW to the Genesis, the steering wheel is like super thin. The BMW, granted, has a really fat and meaty steering wheel, but that's kind of like what I like to feel when I'm pushing it a little bit. This thin little thing does not make me feel like it's very capable. But with that said, it is good steering. Now, another place that the BMW outshines this G70 is the exhaust. And granted, the BMW M340 has the M Sport exhaust, and you get all the pops and the burbles and all the crackles on the downshifts and the gear changes on the upshifts when you're, and even on liftoff. It's just noise everywhere, and it's a little bit much sometimes, but this thing, I want it to be a little bit more. If there was a happy medium in between here, that would be perfect. So ultimately, the G is a supremely impressive car, especially when you consider that this is their first go-around at a performance sedan. It ticks just as many boxes as the BMW, it just does it in a slightly different way. And you're not going to get all the heritage that comes along with the BMW M but I'm really excited to see what Genesis is gonna do next.
So takeaways, which is the better sports sedan? And notice I didn't say which is the faster sports sedan. In the world that we live in, we live by razor thin margins. This one has 5 more horsepower, this one has 4 more pound-feet of torque. It doesn't translate into what makes a better and more fun sports sedan, and that's really what these cars are about. Now the BMW is more violent and aggressive, especially on launch. There's no lag from the turbos, there's no lag from the gearbox, and the car never seems to struggle for grip. It feels like a quicker car. But if you want a quick straight line car, just spend that money on a Challenger Hellcat or a Scat Pack. And in terms of dynamics and driving feel, I really think I have to go with the Genesis. And it comes down to one thing, and that's weight. This Genesis is maybe 100 pounds lighter than the M340, depending on how you spec it. But the way that this chassis and suspension composes that weight, especially in the corners, makes this feel like such a more fun and playful car. The BMW feels like the more solid car, but the G70 is a bit more fun. Now this is a photo finish if I've ever seen one. Both of these cars drive exceptionally well. And to be completely honest, they drive so well, it's just a marginal difference. And if I had a little bit more time with them, if I had a track time with them, I would be able to better tell you which one I think is better at the sports aspect of the sports luxury sedan. However, if I'm being completely honest, 90% of both of these cars are never going to see a racetrack. So this real world road test is probably the most appropriate. Now ultimately, if it were my money, I think I would go with the BMW. In this razor-thin margin race, it really comes down to exhaust note, and that's something that I can enjoy whether I'm pushing at 10/10ths or if I'm just driving to work and do a pull every once in a while. It's something that is easily accessible and something that puts this car just a tiny pinch over the top of the G. But the reality is you're not going to go wrong with either car. Each one embodies an incredible sports sedan. This is greatly improved from the outgoing model, and this new G70 shocks and appalls me, the fact that Genesis was able to get this right the first time. It's basically 1 year old, and it's here, competing with one of Europe's best. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to see more about the BMW M340, go ahead and hit that red subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and click this info card where this guy takes on his big brother, the M3. Thanks for watching, guys. My name is Matt.